Hi, this is Mike making my video to add to my collection. It's 4/26/2025 and it's 2:28 a.m. Yeah, I basically got this whole scenario figured out as far as what uh, the afterlife is all about. Uh, basically. So, with that being said, I pretty much figured it out. It talks about making your eyes into an eye. The upper becomes like the lower, the inside becomes like the outside. So, everything is a projection of the human mind. It's a hallucination. We hallucinate our reality. When we observe something, we create it as we observe it. And when we go to sleep, our body shuts down. And, we're still and we focus. And it usually takes about 20 minutes and we start to see images in our mind. On the backdrop of our eyelids. And, basically what happens is, it starts to, our mind, like some of this AI, generative AI, basically creates, worlds and stuff like that, based on our inputs. And, if you put a various amount of inputs in it, and it's just no different than, what I see from day to day. And my subconscious mind stores those snapshots. And, it traps an image in our mind as a snapshot, basically a JPEG. And all these JPEGs, as you go to sleep, during the REM cycle, your mind generates these images and it stitches them together into a coherent story. And, sometimes, you realize that the images don't speak and they're deaf and dumb spirits. And, basically, they don't speak, and then you don't speak either. And then sometimes you have like the impression that there's sound, but it's all it really is just based on what your outside hearing hears when you're sleeping. Cars driving by, doors shutting and opening. Sometimes music, sometimes wind. Sometimes I have these dreams about tornadoes, and that's when I have wind or a fan blowing, and I can hear it, and it sounds like a tornado. Basically, I have dreams about tornadoes. So anyway, that's all it really is just all your inputs, and your third eye, opens up, and you basically have, uh, you know, uh, a screen, where the third eye is actually based like an actual eye, and it's got cones and rods, and it has a backdrop, probably your eyelids. I'm not sure, but anyway, uh, projects these images inside your head, and you can see them, and they're stitched together. You know, you got all these still frames, and they're stitched together, and sometimes you're given the illusion that they're moving, but as you can see, like generative AI, when you make a movie or something like that, it shows motion, but it's very weak, and it doesn't show the motion like you see during your waking state. All it is Zeno's paradox, and Zeno's paradox in action. And you basically have these still frames, and they're kind of positioned in such a way that it kind of gives you the illusion that they're moving. And it's no different than the waking state. You know, the waking state is the same way. Uh, you know, sometimes you're given the illusion that things are moving, but it's not necessarily quite like that. It's like a bunch of flash rates and a bunch of still frames, and they're stitched together by the human mind and stuff like that. So it's the same as the outside as the inside. So, you know, the master would be in charge of the waking state, and fornicates with the kings of the earth, you know, or the queens of the earth. But the inside state, you know, basically is the sacred virgin, and it only comes out at night, the goddess of the night. And, you know, basically it's your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind is in charge of some of these realities that your conscious mind isn't capable of producing. But, you know, nevertheless, they're two different states, and they're all governed by your mind. One governs the inside, and one governs the outside. And that's really ultimately what it is. This is a very elaborate illusion, and, you know, you think about it, all the things you do day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, all these things, you know, are, you know, basically things that your mind does, and your mind tricks you into believing some of these things are real. It fills in the blanks. Sometimes you know, you could have an event that takes place, and you could have two different people that witness this event, and, you know, they could have completely different outcomes about how they observed it. And, you know, it's like ultimately your subconscious, your mind actually produces all these fill in the blank type things, and, you know, fills in the blanks with all these false memories. And, you know, basically it kind of stitches everything together and kind of makes a false narrative. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, your mind tricks you into believing things. It's a very powerful delusion is what it is. And even even the fact that you say something's tangible and physical, it's really not. When you don't observe it, it doesn't exist. So, you know, with that being said, you know, the afterlife is kind of disturbing, you know, in the sense that, you know, there's a possibility that it's temporary. And this life is temporary as well, and that life is temporary. And, you know, you can wander aimlessly in the dream state. You know, and, you know, your mind stays awake for 30 minutes, you know, or whatever, after you die. And that's probably ample enough time to enter into the light. And when you enter into the light, you know, basically you just become part of the light. There's that, but then again, you know, the spirit world could be something that, you know, you dream. When you dream every night, you travel. And sometimes you travel, and sometimes you don't. You just basically stay within the parameters of what your mind allows. But then again, you know, maybe ultimately you travel regardless. And, you know, that contrived mystery in your mind, you know, the whole environment, you know, could be, you know, a reflection of what this world is. This world is the same way, and you're creating it as you observe it. So maybe when you travel in your dream state, you know, it's no different than me traveling in this state. We're just sojourners in this world, and we're stewards of the earth. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can keep it. You can only play with the toys and enjoy them. And sooner or later, when something gets taken from you or whatever, it's more or less that you're just giving it back. You borrowed it, you enjoyed it. There's no sense in getting too attached to things. And, ultimately that's what it is. You're just giving it back. And so, with that being said, it's all just an illusion. Something generated by the human mind, and you really think about it, it's like you enjoy things for what they are. You become thankful and content. You don't force things. You can't force miracles. You can't force magic. You can't force wealth. And then again, you can't beg for things either. Sometimes if you just relax and be still, and then things will come. If you have the ability to buy something, buy it, and then of course, sometimes you have ebb and flow, you have busts and booms in the economy. Sometimes you have more, sometimes you have less. But, you just realize that everything's going to roll up like a scroll. This world and one above it are passing away, and, they're temporary. And so they say that the one above it would be like the spiritual world, and of course this world. So it stands to reason, when you go in your dream state, and that's a temporary state, it's like, when you wake up, everything is erased, and, you have just fleeting memories of what took place when you were dreaming. And it's no different than being on DMT or something like that, entering into a state, and then you wake up, and it's like going back into that same state is very difficult. It's like you can't necessarily draw from the same things because those things have been used up, and those, let's say, props or whatever in your dreams, they no longer exist. Everything's just temporary. It's just shifting sands that we live on, and things take place, and things are very ephemeral, and even this world, is ephemeral. So, what sense is there? What can how can I rectify and make any sense out of this world? It's a very pointless world that we live in. You just make the best out of what you got going on. It's no different than anybody else. I mean, if you think about it, how difficult it is to live to your 55 or whatever, like me, and you got to consider all the hurdles I had to jump over to get to this point. Not to mention how many people, have sex or whatever, and then out of all those times, all those quadrillions of sperm, one of them little sperm actually meets the egg, and the baby's born, and then it's nurtured, and then nature takes care of it as well, and then that little baby turns into somebody like me. But then, the supernatural realm, very few people can find that path, and the entranceway is a pineal gland, but you think about it, how rare and how almost nearly impossible it is to get to that state where you can start to see things and hear things. You have eyes to see and ears to hear. Not to mention, just the Goldilocks zone that this world is in, and how rare it is just for this world to create life on its own accord, and the light establishes itself. So with that being said, there's really it's really astonishing to figure out how rare things really are to take place. So anyway, that's all I really have to say. So just eat, drink, and be merry, and be content, and work with your hands. And of course your mind to an extent, but you really don't have to do much. So over and out.